If I were to buy a pregnancy guidebook for a friend, this one is a great choice. Hey lady, welcome to the Postpartum on Purpose podcast. If we haven't met, my name is Annemarie. I'm wife to James and mom to 5 beautiful kids ages 10 and under, plus 1 miscarried baby. Here we see postpartum from birth all the way through baby's first year of life as a time of grit, growth, and grace. This is episode 102 already. Lady, I hope you are so well. Let's jump right in this week as we do with Free Things first up. If you've been around a minute, you know that Free Things is mental shorthand for a gentle reminder to myself as well as to you that there is always something to be grateful for during postpartum, and that no matter the size of our family or our budget, a rich, beautiful, meaningful life is available to each one of us. This week's free thing is actually a free thing on behalf of someone I love. A friend of ours from church. She has babysat our kids in the past. She's out of college several years now and is a teacher. She texted me on Sunday shortly before we went to Mass and said, hey, could I give Eva Marie some hair clips and jewelry that I no longer use? And I said, you bet you can. What kinder thing could you do than to give somebody that I love something? So that was a free thing for this week. Nothing too crazy, but that was really thoughtful and touched me very much as a mom. And then moving on to one small change. One small change, as you know, is just a reminder as well that no matter what feels hard or challenging or even impossible to do today, there is always something that is on the move during postpartum. There's always something that is shifting, going away, getting better, no longer becoming an issue, getting delegated to somebody else, what have you. And the one small change this week is that we moved, this might sound a little silly, but we moved toys into different closets this week. Like we changed the way that we're storing. And when I say we, I mean me. I did this. But we moved the kids into different rooms a couple of months ago. And I think I've mentioned that in the past. We now have a room of early risers and a room of late risers. But I had not really moved the belongings in the closets to go with the shifting of the children. So I have the almost 3 next week, almost 3-year-old and 1-year-old, and then the 8-year-old in one room, and then the 4.5 and 10-year-old in the other. So in what I'm calling the boys' room with the 4.5 and the 10-year-old, now there are trains and Legos, but there were things, our rainy day box was in there, the box that we keep special activities and puzzles and games in for a rainy day. The rainy day box was in there. But yeah, there was just kind of a hodgepodge of things as well. So between last week and this week, I got very strategic on what is in what closet so that the toy shelf that we had in the boys' room is now in the room where it will be with the children who play with the things in it. Which just makes sense, right? Intuitively, like put things where you're going to use them or put them close to where they are used. And that makes it easier to clean up as well. So that happened. And then also I shifted things that were in that closet that we don't use as often into the closet in the boys' room up above so that it was more intuitive. Like the organization of things is more intuitive. Things we don't use as often are in the boys' room up high now. Things that we use more often regularly are in the little kids' room so that they are easily accessible. That was the one small change. But one with big impact, I would say. A small change with big impact. And then daily dose of discomfort. Listen, I did a podcast interview that'll come out. I'm not exactly sure when, but I'll post a link to it on the website, postpartumonpurpose.com, when it is live. But I was interviewed for the podcast Sugar and Spice Mom Life by Hannah, who hosts that. And we were talking about the daily dose of discomfort. And I acknowledge that it's not really probably great for branding or marketing. Maybe I need a more catchy term for it. But it's just this concept that we have to be willing to, I invite us, including myself, to be willing to accept some uncertainty, some discomfort, and some lack of control during the postpartum period. And a daily dose of discomfort is a very small way of teaching ourselves that it is safe to be not always in control, that it is safe to be sometimes uncomfortable, sometimes a lot uncomfortable, and that it is safe to sometimes be uncertain about things. Because how often during postpartum are we Googling something frantically or texting everybody that we know or phone calling our only person that we know who's a healthcare practitioner because we feel uncertain about something rather than it being urgent. It's just that we're uncertain. We don't like that feeling. And so we want to get rid of it and the anxiety that goes with it. But the daily dose of discomfort is just a way to expose ourselves to those things. A little bit of discomfort, a little bit of uncertainty, not total control in a situation, to acclimate to that, to accept over time, oh yeah, it's okay to be this way. It's okay to be this way. There are a bazillion things, a bazillion things that could be a daily dose of discomfort for you. But I'd like to give a couple of examples for myself just to maybe give you a sense of what that might look like. And then hopefully you can extrapolate and apply it to your own life. But from the last week, we had a baptism party. I was invited last Wednesday, I think, for Sunday. A little boy was getting baptized that we knew. And I said, sure, we don't have anything else going on Sunday morning. We'll go to Mass at this church instead of at our home parish. And then I did not look at my planner on Sunday until it was too late to go to Mass and the baptism celebration. And I felt very uncomfortable with that because commitment and keeping our commitments is a big value of mine. And I wanted so much to control the situation by somehow, I don't know, putting us all in the car in our pajamas. I'm not sure exactly what in my wild-eyed brain I was thinking we were going to do, but I wanted to get rid of the discomfort of that situation right away and to somehow make it right. And what ended up happening was that I apologized and brought the baptism gift by today when we went into town. But the daily dose of discomfort was accepting what my husband told me, which was we cannot make it to Mass and the baptism on time. We are going to have to just not go. That was very uncomfortable. And then another dose of discomfort has been sitting and eating my breakfast with no other stimuli. Well, by which I mean chosen stimuli. So no reading, even a book or a magazine most of the time, just sitting there and definitely not being on my phone in order to just give my brain time and space to think. But that can be uncomfortable, right? It doesn't have to be a huge discomfort to be the daily dose discomfort. It can be a little one, but we practice, we stretch, we flex those muscles by daily doses of small things. All right, I wanted to talk to you briefly today about a book that came across my radar several months back, I think, The Baby Chick Guide to Positive Pregnancy. I was asked to review it and consider recommending it to the listenership, and I'm happy to do that. I'm not generally one who says you have to get this one resource and no other resource will work. I actually think the opposite in a lot of cases, that there are many great options out there. And to avoid analysis paralysis, pick one that you come into contact with. And I think that's actually in keeping with the spirit of this book. Baby Chick Guide to Positive Pregnancy is written by Nina Spears, who goes by the Baby Chick. That was a name given to her by one of her early on clients. She has worked with women who are expecting and then postpartum as well for the last 15 years. She's attended over 800 births in person she's worked with 800 families in person and been witness to 350 births, which is a very significant amount. But her background spans quite a lot of things related to pregnancy, birth, and the postpartum period. She was trained in infant massage, in perinatal massage, became a birth doula, became a baby planner, which I had never heard of before. But if you can imagine sort of event planning / wedding planning / financial planning, right? You get this idea of like somebody who can go to with all sorts of questions related to the ins and outs of a particular thing. And a baby planner, I learned, is somebody who helps parents sift through all of the kinds of decisions that come up a lot in regard to very practical things like, well, what kind of car seat might I want? And what might make the most sense for me if I'm planning to breastfeed versus bottle feed? Navigating questions that you might have regarding going back to work and your rights as a pumping mom in a workplace, just all kinds of things related to that. But so there's massage for moms and baby prenatally, and then for babies, and then experience with being a birth doula, being a postpartum doula, being a childbirth educator, And then also she is certified in perinatal nutrition as well. So just brings a wealth of knowledge, and is also a mom herself of two. Brings a wealth of knowledge to this book and the creation of this book. And essentially her hope in writing it was to bring the knowledge that she offers to her individual clients and she's worked with in families over the years, uh, to make it accessible to any woman who has the ability to order a copy. And I will just tell you, I really appreciated most of all, like the single most valuable thing I thought about this book was that it was not 800 pages. And here's what I mean by that. It can be so easy, on the one hand, to not go deep at all into anything related to pregnancy, birth, postpartum, because you're just clicking on one 45-second short or reel after another, after another, after another. And the algorithm will just continue to feed you these just little bites, like the smallest little bites to kind of pique your interest, perhaps, but not really give actual knowledge, actual depth of any kind on any particular topic, or to even give you anything to sustain your attention with. So on the one hand, you can do that. You can learn pretty much nothing, but have consumed content for a very long time. But then on the other hand, you can read obsessively or excessively about things that, honest to goodness, are not moral issues, and to some extent will be things that you can figure your way through. By which I mean, you can start down a path, you can go a certain route. Let's take it as an example. Starting a sleep routine versus not for your child, right? Or what you are planning to do as regards to waking up with the baby in the middle of the night. Maybe you and your husband both want to do that if it's your first child, maybe if it's your second or third, but especially if it's your first, perhaps. Like maybe you're thinking, well, he wants to help and he doesn't want me to be alone in the middle of the night, and he wants to show that like he's invested and involved as a dad, all of which is good and beautiful. But you might find out that during that postpartum, or maybe during postpartum number 2 or 3, hey, actually, what we would prefer instead is for one of us to at least have had some sleep. That's something that has worked out in my own family, having gone through 5 postpartums now. I no longer anticipate or really want my husband to get up with the baby when I do, because I'm the one who is breastfeeding the baby. I'm getting up automatically. I don't pump. I feed the baby from the breast. And so I'm the one who gets up in the middle of the night with the baby. And then my husband sleeps as best he can. Not that he isn't aware that I'm getting up and leaving the room, but that he's not getting up and out of bed and turning lights on and any of that kind of a thing. So that we have one of us who is at least more or less well rested in order to be present to the other older kids that we have. So that's just one small example of this concept that you can try something, you can see how it works, and then you can change course if you need to. And I really think that the Baby Chick Guide to Positive Pregnancy, how to prepare your mind, body, and partner, I think does a good job of walking that line, of offering you information about all the different things you might want to consider, especially in regards to pregnancy, right? Because that's the focus of it, is while you are still pregnant, but without obsessing over things, without overwhelming you with details. Just here's enough information, make a decision, and go forward. And that's it. Like that really is, it really is that easy. It really doesn't have to be that complicated. And you can try something and then you can decide, oh, I'm going to do something differently the next time, or it worked for me for a time, but it's not working anymore. All of those things are options on the table. And the tone as well of this book is that you, as a woman, as a mother, are a smart lady, and you can make decisions well too. You don't have to simply say, well, what does Chat GPT say about whatever? You can read something from this book and then make a choice yourself. You can do that. You are a smart lady. You can do that. I thought that this was a Goldilocks level of detail. That's the note that I made from when I was reading through the book. And I appreciated that you don't need a PhD. You don't need a PhD to learn about pregnancy. You can read what she writes, and that's enough. But at the same time, here's something that I appreciated that I didn't find in like the what to expect updates for every week of pregnancy, especially early on. She gets right into it. I always wondered about the nitty gritty, honestly, of like where does the placenta come from? And at what point does the baby's body start developing like from the placenta? And at what point is it, like the baby is now developing its own organ, which is the placenta that's not yours. It's touching you, it's growing into your uterus, but it's not coming from you, right? That's not your genetic material. This is the baby's genetic material that's driving the placenta. So I've just always been curious, and that's just not ever something that's been addressed in the What to Expect app. But she gets into it, like the very first earliest weeks of pregnancy. How does this baby develop from like the very beginning of life? How, just scientifically, like what's happening? And again, not in some crazy level of detail, but just do. Here's what you need to know. I also really liked that she goes through all the things that you would expect, right? She's got checklists, which, of course, if you're a baby planner, I would imagine that you would have checklists. And she does, but she teaches you the things that you would want to know in every trimester. And she breaks it down by weeks as well. I think like several weeks at a time. I'm trying to remember right now, but, broad picture, big picture every trimester, and then, bits and pieces within that trimester. But things like, hey, movements that might be comfortable to you during this trimester, foods to consider based on the nutrients that you need. That's a difference, I would say, versus when I was expecting with my son versus what I'm noticing now. Now, most resources that I am aware of for pregnancy in particular and or postpartum are talking about these specific nutrients that women need. I just don't remember getting that education 10 years ago, but it is present now. Here are the different nutrients that you need, and then here are the ones that will be going into your breast milk and are dependent upon how much you have. As in, like, if you don't have enough, then the baby's not going to get enough, versus what nutrients the baby is going to get enough of no matter what. She talks about what's happening in your body, what's happening in baby's development. Those are the things you'd expect, right? Like those are the things you'd expect from any resource related to pregnancy, just like the What to Expect app or what have you. She also talks a lot about partner prep, and I really appreciated that because I just thought it's very helpful to consider, particularly if it's your first baby, but again, if you're expanding your family and you've got 2 or 3 other kids, those dynamics are a whole thing to consider too. But including your partner, expecting that they want to be supportive of you and of your baby, but may just need some education on how best to help, on how best to support you. She talks about tests, she talks about imaging, she talks about all your options in relation to labor and birth. And I appreciate that those conversations were suggested or broached in a way that was not condemning of one versus the other, medicated versus unmedicated. She just lays information out there, and there are sources at the end of every chapter, so you don't have to take things as just her say so. But I thought that was well done, and again, not to an extraordinary level of detail, just the amount that would be helpful to you. She has had 2 home births herself. Nina Spears, the author, has, and so you can tell that she is very sympathetic to that perspective. She obviously also, as a doula, has great respect for a hands off, a supportive approach, as opposed to one that views birth as a highly medicalized and necessarily interventionalized procedure. I thought that her content struck a great balance of here's the evidence base behind such and such, um, and recognizing at the same time that there are cases, for instance, when C-section is what makes the most sense, right? If you have placenta accreta or placenta previa or fill in the blank, like there's no demonization of any one or the other pregnancy or postpartum choice. She just lays things out there. I appreciated that very much. And then I think what I liked best, and this is not a shock to you, is that she encourages women to prepare for postpartum. Thank you. Because that is important. I get that it's not the focus of the book, but as she recognizes, and she recorded an episode herself, so that's what I'll play next week as the follow up to this episode. This is my review of her book, but then next week will be her in her own words speaking to you. Uh, just she recognizes that how we labor and birth impacts our postpartum, but also that there just needs to be consideration given of everything that happens when the baby is in our arms and we have left the hospital, or if we were at home, the birth workers and whomever have come have left, right? When it's just us and this baby now, what that looks like to get support, what that looks like to just give some thought ahead of time to that very precious period. There are a couple of notes that I will just make about the book because I want to recognize and remember that you, lady, are grown up. Like you and I are both grown ups, and so anytime that we talk about something, that doesn't necessarily mean every single thing that is in this book. Like I would put my imprimatur, my stamp on, right? We can really appreciate the bulk of what somebody is saying, and then have a few things that it's like, you know what, I wouldn't say it that way, or I actually don't agree with that particular point. There are just a couple of things that I would like to point out because they are not in keeping with the approach that I take here at Postpartum on Purpose. One of them was just, and they might seem like little things, but I don't know. I wanted to be clear with you as a listenership on where I'm coming from as I am recommending the book. Just a couple of notes. One is that she talks about if you are avoiding alcohol because you haven't told anybody that you're pregnant yet. So, you're in a public setting or at a party or something and everybody else is drinking alcohol and you're not. She essentially suggests that you could just make up stories essentially as to why that's the case. And I just, I'm not a big fan of making up stories about things. I recognize that sometimes somebody is asking for information that you are not obliged to tell them, but that is different withholding information from just making up a story about something that's not true. I think that can lead people to believe we are not trustworthy. And I recognize that we have the right to tell people when we would like that we are expecting, for instance, but I would not myself, I would not have said just make up a story essentially if there's not truth to that story. And then one other quibble I would say was she talked about the opportunity or the possibility of masturbation to get labor started if your partner's not around. And I guess my question was, first of all, why would you be trying to get labor started if your partner's not around? I mean, I guess if they're deployed, but I was just kind of like, in any other circumstance, I can't see why you wouldn't want to wait for them to be present because the alternative, right, would be like to have sex or nipple stimulation. But yeah, I just masturbation. I can't get on board with that because it uses the sexual urge and sexual pleasure and turns it inward as opposed to turning it outward. And sex is always meant to be an act between two people, between a husband and a wife that has the potential for both bonding and openness to life. And offers a gift of self to the other person. And masturbation necessarily precludes the possibility of giving yourself to another person. You can't give yourself to another person when you are masturbating. So yeah, those were the two main things I think that I was just kind of like, oh, you know what? I definitely would not have said that. I just want to put that out there, like, hey, that wouldn't be my perspective. But truly, overall, as a whole, I gave this book once I finished it to a friend who's expecting. I said, hey, I really think you're going to like this. And this is a book that I would be willing myself to recommend to another mom to say, hey, like whether you've had one kid or three or five, I think there's something in here that could be good for you at whatever count you are, however many children you welcomed.